Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you all here on a weekend because the President of the United States started bombing Venezuela and kidnapped its leader at 2 a.m. last night. More importantly, I am here to clarify a tweet made by Mr. Poilievre this morning stating, congratulations to President Trump on successfully arresting narco-terrorist and socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro, who should live out his days in prison. Down with socialism, long live freedom.
We get to see the maple trees, maple sugar on the maple leaves. We got the biggest wheat fields growing tall. In Canada, where we see the reversing falls. In Canada, we get to see them all.
Good day, eh? Well there, Happy New Year from Canada. And boy, we're off to a bang. Well, I was going to talk about the ongoing Maple MAGA problem here, and Alberta's separation referendum on the ballot, and the multiple petitions to recall Danielle Smith and, 20-some other Alberta MPs, and upcoming Conservative leadership conference with Pierre Poilievre's future hanging on the balance, and other big stories here, but of course, the Mango Mussolini had to suck up all the oxygen with his unlawful and bananas middle-of-the-night bombing and coup in Venezuela.
Bruh.
The always consistent big-brain genius had previously said he was prepared for a long-term nation-building process involving oil companies and a continued military presence in the region in order to pressure Maduro to leave. But instead, he sent in the Delta Force and the Army Rangers in what's described as a bold, out-of-our-minds operation.
It was a hugely risky operation. When you think of the others, like about 5 years ago today when Trump took out Qasem Soleimani, I mean, that was a drone strike. So we were way far away. To send troops in on a daring mission was high risk. I hope that we hear at 11 o'clock or soon that there were no U.S. casualties. There have been none reported. But this was a bold, out of our minds sort of operation, and it's incredible that this worked.
Idiot.
Contrary to what the idiot Little Marco told the press on Saturday, the VP of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, along with the National Defense Council, won't go along with the program and instead has condemned the attack and kidnapping of Maduro as a barbaric act by an illegal invader that must be rejected, and stated that Venezuela would never be a U.S. colony.
Philippines this morning, the Venezuelan court has now directed Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez to assume the powers and duties of acting president.
Rodriguez called Maduro's detention a, quote, kidnapping and demanded his release, adding that Maduro is, quote, the sole president of Venezuela. And that appears to contradict a statement made by President Donald Trump, who said Rodriguez was willing to work with the U.S.
We have something to tell Mr. Trump. Venezuela doesn't owe the U.S. anything.
And yet Rodriguez has for many years been sanctioned by Canada, the EU, and the United States. CNN attempted to question her in 2016 after an investigation uncovered a scheme to illegally sell Venezuelan passports out of the country's embassy in Iraq. Rodriguez, then the foreign minister, refused to comment on every occasion. In keeping with her political pedigree, Rodriguez has a less than subtle message for the Trump administration as she demanded Maduro's release. Her involvement in any future transition in Venezuela will be challenging. So clearly there are still many questions this morning in regards to how the U.S. and Venezuela will move forward with cooperating with each other as they now navigate through this new political space.
Predictably, the felonious Mellon responded, saying, if she doesn't do what's right, she's going to pay a very big price, probably bigger than Maduro. And he would not stand for her defiant rejection of military intervention by the United States. Oh, boy. And he also stated that we do need Greenland, absolutely, while describing the island, which is part of Denmark, surrounded by Russian and Chinese ships. After Maduro and his wife were snatched from their beds in the middle of the night and flown out of the country with blindfolds, Donsky proclaimed that members of his cabinet would run Venezuela. But he won't show us the plan. Maybe in 2 weeks. Officials from oil companies and hedge fund managers are already planning their trip to look for investment opportunities in March. Charles Myers, the chairman of the political risk advisory firm Signum Global Advisors and a former vice chairman of the investment advisory firm Evercore, told Business Insider that the mood among investors as spoken is one of cautious optimism following news of Maduro's ouster. I think the centerpiece of Venezuela's success looking out 12 months or even 24 months is foreign investment, Myers said. A big part of the Venezuela story starting today is foreign investment, especially in oil and gas, which is pretty straightforward. but there are massive opportunities in construction and tourism. Meyer said it's not the responsibility of his firm to take a moral position on whether it was right or wrong for the U.S. to involve itself in Venezuela's government, but rather to help the firm's clients anticipate investment opportunities or mitigate risk due to geopolitical events. However, he added his firm very much expected the situation in Venezuela would unfold as it has, and has been preparing investor groups to be ready to travel to the country when the opportunity presents itself. Sygnum previously hosted similar trips for asset managers and hedge funds to visit Syria and Ukraine. But it's not all or even about the oil. Experts like Mr. Global on YouTube break it down well. And as we've explained here in previous videos on Political Drain, we talked about the critical minerals deposited in Venezuela and Don Jr.'s involvement in a mining company and Russian weapons on the ground there too.
Don Jr. is involved with a company that has just gotten $750 million from the government. And what they do is mine rare earth minerals. Venezuela has the most rare earth minerals on earth. And a lot more backyard dealing, backdoor dealing going on with this corrupt president and his son and his son-in-law.
And we know he wants Greenland, despite the rejection from both its own people and from Denmark.
Said that it was up to others to decide what U.S. military action in Venezuela means for Greenland. They are going to have to view it themselves. I really don't know. He was very generous to me, Marco, yesterday. Trump said, I wasn't referring to Greenland at the time, but we do need Greenland, absolutely. We need it for defense. And it comes as this is what Stephen Miller's wife, Katie Miller, is posting on Twitter. Stephen Miller is the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, literally is the one kind of responsible for a lot of the administration's policies. And she's posting an image showing the United States of America over Greenland. And this has all prompted lots of alarm bells. So this is a statement from the Premier of Greenland. Let me state this calmly and clearly from the outset. There is neither reason for panic nor for concern. The image shared by Katie Miller depicting Greenland wrapped in an American flag changes nothing whatsoever. Our country is not for sale and our future is not decided by social media posts. That said, the image is disrespectful. Relations between nations and peoples are built on mutual respect and international law, not on symbolic gestures that disregard our status and our rights. We are a democratic society with self-government, fair elections, and strong institutions. Our position is firmly grounded in international law and internationally recognized agreements. This is not in question. The government of Greenland continues its work calmly and responsibly. We engage in dialogue, safeguard our interests, and uphold the international rules that also bind our partners. There is no reason for panic, but there is every reason to speak out against the lack of respect. That is directly from the Prime Minister of Greenland. But if you want
Cuba, Colombia, Mexico, and other Latin countries have been threatened. More about that in an upcoming video. And as for China and Russia and Israel, well, what's to stop them now from doing what the U.S. has done?
Bombarded, and he's laying in bed, and they just run in there, grab him, throw him in a helicopter, and here you have it. Folks, it does not happen like that. He was being protected by the Russians, the Chinese, the Cubans, his own special forces. This was an inside job. I wrote about it on January 1st. There was a conversation that happened between Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Kirill Dmitriev. Donald Trump was present in Mar-a-Lago. It was discussing about this invasion and what would take place. Some of the Venezuelan leaders are in on it. That is why you are seeing only Maduro being taken, because it's a prize for him. This is, again, this is to distract, to do, because the leadership has not changed the regime. That's why, as embarrassing as it is, he basically told Machado, we're not supporting you. You're not loved by the Nobel Peace Prize. You're not loved. You're not supported. We're going to support the dictators that were in power, just as long as Maduro's not there. So there's a lot right now breaking behind the scenes. But also you heard how he came out and said, hey, China, I'm going to give you some of Venezuelan oil. The other thing the media is not talking about, they mentioned it, but then there was a Chinese delegation that met with him literally hours prior to this taking place. Now, I've spoken to a lot of my sources, and a lot of generals and other people say we would have to notify the Chinese, because can you imagine us wiping out a Chinese delegation while we're trying bombing? So the fact that the Chinese were still there, the fact that this was done without no lives being lost, they came in, they took him in strictly pinpoint. It was all pre-planned by the Russian, the Chinese approved it, and also Maduro's inside people.
So what does Canada have to say? Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand gave an official statement to the press the day after the strike, saying, calling for all parties to respect international law. Anand says the Canadian government has refused to recognize the legitimacy of the Venezuelan government under Maduro and has opposed the oppression of the country's citizens since 2019, a time when Canada closed its embassy in Venezuela. And Anand said, in the long-standing commitment of upholding the rule of law and democracy, the Canadian government is calling on all political parties to respect international law as the situation unfolds in Venezuela, noting Canada stands by the people of Venezuela and their desire to live in a peaceful and democratic society. Canada is engaging with its international partners and monitoring developments closely. Federal government is ready to help Canadians in need via consular officials and its embassy in Bogota, Colombia. And the perpetual embarrassment, Pipsqueak Pierre Poilievre piped up and congratulated the felonious Führer in his success, saying congratulations to President Trump on successfully arresting narco-terrorist and socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro, who should live out his days in prison. The legitimate winner of the most recent Venezuelan elections, Edmundo Gonzalez, should take office along with a courageous hero and voice of the Venezuelan people, Maria Corina Machado. Down with socialism! Long live freedom! Yeah, well, the misogynist moron has already said that Maria Machado hasn't got any support, and he didn't say a word about the legitimate winner, Edmundo Gonzalez. Nope, it's his cabinet that's going to run the show. If it can happen to Maduro, it can happen anywhere.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you all here on a weekend because the President of the United States started bombing Venezuela and kidnapped its leader at 2 a.m. last night. More importantly, I am here to clarify a tweet made by Mr. Poilievre this morning stating, congratulations to President Trump on successfully arresting narco-terrorist and socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro, who should live out his days in prison. Down with socialism, long live freedom. Now, to state in no uncertain terms, Mr. Poilievre supports Donald Trump in this war because socialism is bad, freedom is good, drugs are scary, Trudeau is mean, and bring Canada home. That's what he gave me.
In his remarks to the press the day after the attack, Sleepy Don once again repeated that drugs are flowing in from Canada, even after our government at the time gave in to his demands for a tighter border and appointment of what he calls a border czar. Well, the current Prime Minister, Mark Carney, waited over 12 hours before he posted a statement on Sunday saying the following. One of the first actions taken by Canada's new government in March 2025 was to impose additional sanctions on Nicolas Maduro's brutally oppressive and criminal regime, unequivocally condemning his grave breaches of international peace and security, gross and systematic human rights violations, and corruption. Canada has not recognized the illegitimate regime of Maduro since it stole the 2018 election. The Canadian government therefore welcomes the opportunity for freedom, democracy, peace, and prosperity for the Venezuelan people. Canada has long supported a peaceful, negotiated, and Venezuelan-led transition process that respects the democratic will of the Venezuelan people. In keeping with our long-standing commitment to upholding the rule of law, sovereignty, and human rights, Canada calls on all parties to respect international laws. We stand by the Venezuelan people's sovereign right to decide and build their own future in a peaceful and democratic society. Canada attaches great importance to resolution of crises through multilateral engagement and is in close contact with international partners about ongoing developments. We are first and foremost ready to assist Canadians through our consular officials and our embassy in Bogota, Colombia, and will continue to support Venezuelan refugees. So that is Canada's official response. There have been other people who've responded, like Charlie Angus of the Resistance. He wrote on Substack on Sunday, the following. He said, he's deliberately targeted the Western alliances with threats of invasion in Greenland or arbitrarily moving the Canadian border. With the attack on Venezuela, he has upped the ante through invasion and kidnapping. Venezuela puts the world on notice, and Canada must be ready. We played a key role in establishing the International Criminal Court. We helped establish the Statute of Rome, which laid out key protections against state violence. Canada has a long history of defending the international rule of law. We are now dealing with a regime that will kill people in the water, seize ships on the high seas, invade other countries, and kidnap their leaders. All bets are off. This is the age of gangsters, and Canada must be ready to rise to the threat. We must work to build alliances with other democratic nations in Latin America, Europe, and Asia. We need to establish the Citizens Volunteer Force. We must be ready for whatever comes next from the gangsters on our border. Well, it's going to be a long battle, my friends, so hang in there and join us in fighting fighting back against these madmen. They want us to give in and to feel afraid and hopeless and alone, but they don't have the support of the people. Finally, I suggest you watch this video all the way through to the end. He makes a perfect analogy of how the world should view these imperialist actions. And meanwhile, keep your elbows up. Canada will always stand strong and free.
I went to school once with a sociopath, grade 7, his name was Brian, big kid. Brian's only real consideration was himself. He didn't hold doors because there's nothing in it for him. He would walk up, take food straight out of your lunch, no asking, no eye contact. If you spoke to him and it didn't benefit him, he simply didn't answer. Rules are fine, as long as they apply to someone else. And then one day, Brian came walking down the hall. He was in tears. The vice principal was in tow. The two of them came up to me and a couple of kids in the hall. The vice principal says, "Brian wants to know why you hate him so much." The US invaded another country and kidnapped its president overnight. It was illegal under international law, and under its own laws for that matter, although I think it's obvious to any country other than itself that it's just simply suspended laws now. The US is often confused by how other countries see it. I've always thought the most clear example of this was 9/11. Here, outside the States, we watched news reports of Americans being interviewed, and almost every one of them was a variation on, why would someone do this to us? What have we ever done to them? Don't they like freedom? No, what we don't like is arrogance and hypocrisy. Somehow the US bought into this mythology that it's like the global police force, the world's justice system. Look, those things already exist internationally. They come with courts, they come with treaties and inspectors and rules that are supposed to apply to everyone, especially the big kids. But the US has opted out of major parts of that system. It never joined the International Criminal Court. It never ratified the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty or the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, even while enforcing its rules when convenient. Maybe most horrifyingly, some of the additional protocols of the Geneva Convention, the ones that strengthen protections for civilians and limit methods of warfare, were sent to the Senate in 1987. They are still waiting for a vote. Rules are fine, as long as they apply to someone else. Look, that pattern didn't start in Venezuela. In 1954, the CIA helped overthrow Guatemala's democratically elected government. Why? Land reform threatened U.S. corporate interests. Money. 2003, Iraq, weapons of mass destruction, mobile labs, aluminum tubes. And none of it was true. The U.S. went around the UN Security Council when it couldn't get approval and invaded anyway. Why? To regain influence over the global oil system. Money. 1973, the U.S. backed a coup in Chile because the country had nationalized copper mines owned by American companies. Money. The justification for Venezuela was fentanyl. Which is laughable, it's not even made there. If this is about drugs, why did the US pardon the president of Honduras, who was convicted for trafficking 400 tons of cocaine into the States? Of course it's the money. Trump even said so this morning. The US would take control of Venezuela's massive oil reserves and recruit American companies to move in. Remember, who did Trump pick to serve as Secretary of State in his first term? The chairman and CEO of ExxonMobil. In other words, your sovereignty is an inconvenience to our ability to enrich ourselves. Let's be clear about this. What the US did is an act of war, and it should be a stark warning to nations like Greenland, and yes, Canada, with all our oil reserves the US wants, and the critical minerals it desperately needs. Trump's already been laying the groundwork with false claims about fentanyl dealer, even as recently as this morning.
We lost it to drugs. Plenty coming through Canada too, by the way.
And if you think I'm overreacting, know that the Canadian military has confirmed it is setting up air defense systems, hiring more forces, and even considering how a civilian force would work, which is why it is especially baffling that according to a tweet from its leader today, the Conservative Party of Canada is squarely in Trump's corner. But that, my American friends, and you are friends, that is why the world doesn't trust your country. It's not about freedom. It's about decency. Being strong doesn't mean you get to ignore the rules. Being strong means that you are strong enough to follow them, even when you don't like the outcome. Brian never thought of himself as a villain. He thought he was practical, efficient, above the inconvenient rules of the classroom. Teachers spent years cleaning up his messes while the rest of us learned to keep our lunches close and our expectations low. No one trusted Brian. No one wanted to be around him, even when he needed help. And eventually, everyone noticed. And wherever Brian went, things got worse.
The news is divided. Ground news puts it back together. So you can see how many sources are reporting on any breaking story, where they fall on the political spectrum, how reliable they are, and who owns them. Compare headlines and read full articles to see which details are prioritized, exaggerated, or left out entirely. Because the more we understand the media, the more we'll understand each other. Visit ground.news to learn more.
Hey, yeah, you. Before you click away to watch someone unbox a tactical toothbrush, let's talk about something real. Political Drain isn't just another content mill. We're a digital front in a very real war. Not with bullets, but with ideas, with action, and with solidarity. We pair urgent news with critical education. And we build community around actual resistance, not the hashtag kind. The kind that moves. But here's the thing. None of this is free. It isn't. Behind every video is time, labor, research, and some weird guy asking if we're going to pay the hosting bill. And yeah, some of that money goes to things we can't necessarily say out loud. If you know, you know. Let's just say our special ops aren't Call of Duty LARPers. They're people making real moves to protect, uplift, and organize. You're not just funding a channel. You're funding a resistance network in a world where capital still calls the shots. Unfortunately, in a system built on artificial scarcity, even mutual aid has a price tag. And if we want to grow, if we want to win, we need your help. We need your help. So if you've got even a few bucks to spare, toss it our way. It's not for ads. It's not for merch drops, but for people making moves in the shadows so others can do it in the light. It's just us and you. So fund the mission, fund the fight, fund the future, because nobody's coming to save us. We save each other. That's how this works.